Hey guys, what's going on? Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Retroid Pocket 2. This is going to be an honest opinion. I have seen these things are just blowing up right now. Everybody's doing reviews on them, and it seems like everywhere you turn you can see them. So if you're like me, these have really piqued your interest as a person that loves video games and retro video games in particular, and specifically handheld. This is something that I really wanted to get my hands on, and I was very excited. So I just got mine probably about 3 weeks ago, and I've been using it here and there. I do have some opinions on it, and we're going to jump right into that. So number one, just taking a look at the system, I got the I can't remember what they call it. It's like the Game Boy Advance blue color. I think it's indigo, I believe is what they call it. So looking at the system here, you can see that you've got a 3.5-inch screen on the front. You've got 4 face buttons in the configuration of Nintendo, which is going to be A, B, X, and Y. And then you've also got a D-pad and 2 analog sticks. Now the difference in these analog sticks is this one on the left here, what a lot of people would call like the main analog stick, is actually a real analog stick, and it's very similar to like a Nintendo Switch. It does not click, so you do not have L3. The right analog stick, however, is a digital, like a slider stick, more like the 3DS. And they both feel really good. The reason, I guess, for them doing this kind of flat digital stick on the side on the right here is just so that it doesn't get in your way when you're trying to use these buttons. And I think that it works pretty well. Moving down to the bottom of the face here, we've got a home button, select, and start. And then up here at the top, just working straight across from left to right, we've got an L button, ZL, which is really cool. They kind of took the inspiration from Nintendo on the labeling for these buttons, and I think that's kind of nice because it is obviously very reminiscent of a Nintendo product. Right here, we've got a micro HDMI cable, USB-C for charging. You've got volume down and volume up respectively, and then the power button. And then over to the right, we've got R and ZR. So working around to the right side, we've got nothing, just kind of the profile there for the shoulder buttons. The bottom, you're going to see a 3.5mm headphone jack and a TF card there in the middle. It does come with one included. Mine is a 32 gig. I'm assuming that's probably what they're all going to be. And then over to the left, again, just like the right, it's just going to be a profile of those shoulders and nothing else is going on. So my opinions of this device, as far as just the hardware goes itself, it feels really good. It's definitely a very premium product, especially as far as, you know, these Chinese consoles go. As a person that loves the Nintendo Switch and the Switch Lite, which I actually should have set one out for with these, that would be easier to kind of compare it to. I may grab it in just a second, but taking a look at the hardware and the feel of it, it feels really nice. It's got a nice weight to it, but it's not too heavy and it's not too light. So if you're somebody that likes handheld systems, that's something that you'll probably understand. It just feels really good in the hands. The buttons all feel great. When I first got started with the D-pad, it felt a little stiff to the point that I wasn't a big fan, to be honest with you, but now it's kind of got a nice satisfying little click to it, and it's really not bad. It's very usable. Same thing with the analog sticks. As I kind of briefly mentioned, they both feel good, but they're obviously very different. And then the face buttons feel very similar to the D-pad, maybe just a slightly softer click, but they feel great as well. Same with the shoulder buttons up top. The L and R obviously have a really satisfying click, and the triggers are a little mushier than I would like, but when you're holding it like this, they feel really nice and they're very usable and practical. The home, select, and start all feel good. They're protruded just barely from the face of the system itself, if you can kind of see that. So they're easy to feel, but not so much that they kind of get in the way or stick out too much. So that's nice. You've got 2 speakers on the front here. Sounds really good, honestly. And then the Retroid Pocket branding there. So turning it on, what you're going to be greeted with, hit the power switch there. So I've already got it booted up into Android. I've kind of tinkered with it just a little bit and disabled some applications that I know that I don't want and just kind of optimize it to my liking. And as I said, this is going to be an honest review of this system as a person that's used it you know, really wanted to love it, but I just don't quite love it, and I'm going to tell you why. So the Android system, obviously this is not a touchscreen. I guess that may not be obvious, but this is not a touchscreen. So the Android system is going to be completely controlled using the D-pad and the face buttons. That is fine, and honestly, with a launcher like this, it's usable, but it's not preferred. You may be better off just getting a second-party launcher for it that's kind of a little more streamlined and not so much like a phone launcher. But using the D-pad is fine. Using the other thing that they've got built in here for Android to just make it a little bit easier, and it does help. If you press and hold the home button for just a couple of seconds, you'll be greeted with a cursor that is going to be controlled with the left analog stick. Now, while you've got this enabled like this, you can still scroll up and down through pages, which is helpful. And then if you use left and right on the D-pad, it's going to change the speed of the cursor. So it looks like they've kind of got that backwards. It seems like it's not, there it goes. Okay, so left seems to make it a little quicker and right seems to slow it down a little bit. Now, my issue with this Android, not only is it not a touchscreen, I can deal with that, really I don't have much of an issue. A couple of things. One, it's kind of sluggish. So the built-in Android browser, and right now this is running Android 6.0, so it's a little dated. They're supposed to be launching Android 8. I just don't know when that's going to happen. So I loaded Chrome on here because, like I said, the built-in browser is just no good, in my opinion. You'll just kind of notice that even on, and I have very fast internet, even on a stable connection, the browser is just a little slow. And then that kind of just translates all over the system. So really, I mean, you can see even dragging down this little window, you can see it kind of chugging there. I'm trying to keep that reflection off the screen, but it just kind of chugs through everything. And granted, this isn't a very powerful handheld, but being such an old version of Android, I would expect it to run a bit better. So I was a little disappointed to see that. The other thing that really bothers me is if we jump into like a text box, and this worked out perfectly, this keyboard is not very good. And I know there's not a lot that they could do with the keyboard, but the issue I have is there don't seem to be any shortcuts for the buttons in terms of like, like L being backspace, or like L2 or ZL rather being capitalized or anything like that. So there's no shortcuts, which kind of bothers me. So you're really just left with moving around. And this is another thing that bothers me, again minor, but I'm being honest, is when you capitalize and you press a letter, it doesn't automatically switch back to lowercase letters. So if you need to go back to lowercase, you have to go all the way back over and disable that uppercase there. So then now you're back into lowercase letters. And it's just kind of an annoyance, and I'm not a big fan of the keyboard. I've actually found myself more often using a Bluetooth keyboard, because this does have Bluetooth built in, which is very nice. So I've actually found myself using a Bluetooth keyboard to kind of navigate Android, and that helps a bit. But again, it's just kind of slow. And if you're somebody like me, that, jumping into one of my next little gripes about this system, that likes just kind of a streamlined system, as a person that has some experience with emulation station on RetroPies and things like that, I love that aesthetic, that whole UI, just the way that you can easily kind of neatly organize all of your games and just have everything in one launcher. Everything's just right in one place and it's easy to find and get to. With Android, you are left with, unless you use something like RetroArch, which is not very beginner friendly, we'll put it that way. If you use something like RetroArch, it's doable. I'm not a big fan of RetroArch, it's just kind of personal preference. I don't really like the kind of XMB theme to it. I'm not a big fan. There are other options like Dig, which Dig and RetroArch are actually included on this system. They're already pre-installed. But again, Dig is another one I'm not just a huge fan of. So my complaint is that everything is just going to be separate emulators, which is fine, but like I said, I just prefer that clean aesthetic. I like to have, box art for my games. I like to have, the title and maybe a description for my game, so that I can kind of just have everything in one place and it's easy to see and easy to get to, and it just looks clean, it just looks professional. So with Android, you're left with separate emulators, like Mupen 64 here, for instance. And for most emulators, you're not going to get that box art. Mupen 64, that's new. It's been a while since I've messed around with Mupen 64, but it used to just be a list of all the file names, and you just click it and launch it. So it looks a little better now. It's not even wanting to work with me. There it goes. And I'll just kind of launch this while I'm talking for just a second. It looks a little bit better now, and So that helps a lot, but I don't like having to go back to the home screen and switch applications every time that, if I wanted to play N64 or GBA or what have you. So let's see, can you continue the game? Maybe it's this button. There it goes. So gameplay wise, once you actually get into a game, it runs really well. I have yet to run into anything that I really have an issue with. Now, these are stated to run Psp games, and we'll get into that in just a second. These are stated to run Psp games, and I have obviously my Psp Go for that, and I also have my Vita, which is also running custom firmware. So if I'm going to play a Psp game, it's not going to be on this. I didn't buy it for that. So Dreamcast was a big selling point for me. N64 was a big selling point for me, and PS1 was a big selling point for me. Now, obviously, if you're talking about running the original Nintendo or SNES or any of the Game Boys, you're not going to have a problem with that. So, I mean, if that's what you're into, this is going to run that great. Now, for me, Dreamcast, N64, and PS1, more of that kind of second wave or 64-bit systems, I am extremely impressed with. So that's something else. I'll go ahead and hit that right here. If you're looking to get into Dreamcast, PS1, or N64, I have yet to run into any issues with this system, so it's great for that. Now, getting back into some of my other issues, so as far as gaming goes, I don't think you're going to really have any complaints, at least very few if you do. My main thing is I do not like the Android interface on this very much. I find that I go back and just I'll play my Vita, obviously I play my Switch a ton, or I'll play my Psp Go, or I've even found myself going back to the old LDK, which is, other than my Psp Go and my Vita, which are my two favorite handhelds of all time, this is probably it right here. I absolutely love this thing, and something that excited me about the Retroid over the LDK is, for one, it's not the form factor, because I absolutely love the form factor of the LDK. It's just very small, very pocketable, and easy to just just pick up and put down. That said, one thing that would make the LDK perfect in my mind is if it had a sleep mode. There's no way to suspend the system if you're in a game. So basically what that means, if you jump in and you're playing a Game Boy game on the train or what have you, if you're playing that game and you need to get off the train or whatever, you would have to turn the system off completely, and then later when you want to get back into the game, you have to turn the system back on, go through the whole boot up process, which isn't terribly long. It's about 30 to 40 seconds. Go through the boot up process, weed through all the games, find the game you want, boot it up, load your save, and then you're back in. So the Retroid Pocket 2 actually includes a Suspend State. You can kind of see it there. It's very similar to, like your phone, or obviously especially Android. If you are in a game, and I'm just going to boot up Mario Kart again. If you are in a game, let's resume that, or anywhere you're at, one of the big selling points for me was that you do actually get that Suspend State, which is really nice. And again, the form factor is fine, I like it, but this is just more pocketable, and that's why I'd rather see it on this. But so now, just as an example that we already understand, we can just go ahead and hit that same power button, just one click. That puts it in sleep mode, just like your phone. Press it again, and you're supposed to be back up. Well, see, there's an issue right there. I know I've tested it with some other systems, but either way, you get the point. So it does have a Suspend State. Obviously not with Mupen 64 apparently, but it does have a Suspend State. So now jumping over to, we'll call it good on Android. You've kind of heard some of my gripes and some of the things that I do like, which are fewer that I do like than the things that I don't like, I guess. So with this system, you're also going to have this toolbox pre-installed. Now with that toolbox, if you want to use, because these are advertised to dual boot two different operating systems. One is going to be this Android 6.0. The other is going to be Retroid's own operating system, or UI. So you open this toolbox and you just scroll down to where it says Install Retroid Pocket App. So you click that. Now I've obviously already done that, but after it does that, you will then have this new icon on your home screen that's just called Retroid. So if we click this and launch it, and this is something that I tried to do some research on before I got this device and couldn't find anything, and this is something I was really not very sure about. There's just not a lot of answers. I mean, even still, I can't find many answers for it. And I'm going to get into some of my gripes with this and some of the things that I like more about this over the Android operating system for this system specifically. So it's going to switch. It generally doesn't take too long. Again, like I said, for the LDK, very similar, 30 to 45 seconds. Looks like we're already booting up here. And it is working on it. So this is what you'll be greeted with. I have installed a couple of games from the market that's built in, and I'll show you that in just a second. This system right here is absolutely amazing. I love this UI. I love this operating system. I would prefer to see more of an emulation station or RetroPie inspired theme, but this is manageable, and this is kind of what I'm talking about when I was talking about having kind of everything in the same place. This is what I'm talking about right here. So you can see up at the top here, we've got some tabs. If we scroll over, you can see categories, and these are the Psp games that come pre-installed on this system. I haven't really played them. I think I tried Ridge Racer for a minute, and it ran okay. Obviously not as good as a PSP. It's not full speed, so don't count on that. But these are pre-installed. If you scroll over to the right, these are PlayStation 1 games that were pre-installed. And everything you're going to see was pre-installed on the system with the exception of a couple that I have added, and I'll point those out. PS1 runs great. I've had no issues with PS1, even running on the Android side of the system. We've also got Nintendo 64. Now, I think, if memory serves, I think the only game that was on here, I think there were two. I think it was Mario Kart 64 and Super Mario 64. Both of those run great on the Retroid Pocket operating system. No issues with that. And then, of course, you've got a bunch of older systems. You're gonna have the Famicom or NES in the States, Super Famicom or Super Nintendo in the States. Then you're gonna have GBA, GBC, which is strangely uses the same little icon with just a slightly different color variation. Mega Drive, and then it goes on for a little bit. And then, of course, Dreamcast. Now, when I was doing my research on this, I heard a lot of people say that this Retroid Pocket operating system is not great for running Dreamcast. Now, that has not been my experience, whether that helps or hurts. There may be games that you find that aren't going to run as well, but the games that I really wanted to try run very well. So just for instance, Spider-Man on Sega Dreamcast, if we boot that up, it's going to load for a second, and you do have save and load states. So there are a couple, that brings me into a couple issues with the Retroid Pocket operating system, is that from what I understand, the built-in, like in-game game saves, I said game a lot there, but the in-game game saves is broken. So if you rely on, going through the actual game itself to save the game, and I have tried this with a couple of games, when you come back, it's just like you started the game over for the first time. So you do have to rely on these save states. And I'll show you what that looks like. I'll just load my state here. And we're back in. So I have not tinkered with any of the settings. I don't actually think that there are even any settings that you can change as far as like frame skip or anything like that. But it runs very well. I've not really had any issue. Like a couple frame drops here and there, but definitely not anything that's game breaking. So I'm very happy with that. So Dreamcast works well. And you may have just noticed right there, what is one of my two big issues with this operating system itself, and that is that, and it'll be a lot easier to see. Let's see, we'll exit the game. It'll be a lot easier to see with Nintendo 64, but my issue is that, and I have researched and I have not found anything, but that the left analog stick and the right analog stick are in the system the same thing. And there's no way to remap those on a per game or per system basis. So what that means is that for Nintendo 64 specifically, most people are obviously going to want to, or at least if you're like me, are going to want to use the right analog stick for the C buttons, right? Now, because these two in the actual root of the system are recognized as the same input, that's obviously not doable. And I haven't even found a way to remap them in the first place, so it's not doable. So games that like Ocarina of Time or Mario 64 that heavily utilize those C buttons, especially for like camera movement, I have just simply not found a way to do it. So that is one of my biggest and honestly most game breaking issues with the Retroid Pocket operating system itself is that the C buttons are seemingly non-existent. And that also means that games like Super Smash Bros., where the C buttons are typically to jump, I have not even found a way to jump on this system unless you just press up on the left analog stick. And that's a minor annoyance, but for other games, it's a little bigger of a deal. Now, my next issue with this, and this is kind of like beggars can't be choosers type of situation, but the next thing is that with this, and this is one of the really huge selling points that got me very interested, and I obviously do not condone piracy. Like I said, the games that I do have, I actually already own myself, but you do have access to this store, we'll call it, even though everything is free, where you can access games for all of these systems, right? Now, here's my issue with this. One, at first glance, it has to be, as a retro gamer, and especially somebody that likes these Retroid emulation handhelds, it has to look like one of the best things that's ever happened. Now, it is and it isn't, and here's the reason why. So if you find a game and you're just scrolling through like the top charts or whatever for any given system, you click it, you just click install, it installs, and it automatically gets a cover art and a little video on the home screen. So everything is super seamless, super easy, and super nice. Now, the issue that I have is, one, it does not have all of the games for each system. So there's a very, very, very good chance that whatever game it is that you're looking for whatever system, you're not going to find it. And that has been my experience. I think games that I've actually manually searched for, I think I've found 1 out of 10. And that's being maybe even generous, as bad as that sounds. So the issue is that when you search, for instance, one of them that I was searching for, I have Gauntlet on PS1. So if you search for Gauntlet, so there you have it. And even if I fill out the rest of Gauntlet, this is the only game that it finds. And this is an FBA game. So there are other Gauntlet games on NES, Super Nintendo, there are games on Genesis, there are games on PS1. I think that same Gauntlet game was also released for Dreamcast and Nintendo 64. So the fact that it's not finding any of those other games, that's what really bothers me. So that's one thing. The next thing is that even if you are searching for a game, it may be on here, but the names are just wrong. And I'm trying to think of where I just saw a perfect example of this. It might have been PlayStation. So there are just games, it may just be poor translation or whatever, legal issues or whatever it is, but there are some games that are, you can tell by the picture, and even if you downloaded it and played the game, it is the game that you thought it was, but the name in the actual market is not right. It'll be, just something way off, and I'm not going to be able to find it. Well, like right there, Pepsi Superman, that's not the name of the game, it's just Pepsi Man, if I remember correctly. And more times than not, it's further off than that. It would just say like Soda Man or something like that. That would be a pretty good example. That's the type of thing that you see. So even searching for it, you might not find it because it's on here, but the name is wrong. And that is, that's something that's it's unfixable. There's no way to fix that unless you just scroll through forever to try to find the specific game. The other thing is that if you download a game from this system on the Retroid operating system, and then you switch back to Android, it does not access these downloads. At least not that I've seen, and based on what I've heard, that is just the way it is. So if you download a game from this market, don't expect for it to work on Android, because it won't. So both, that'll just to kind of summarize this video and my opinion of this system specifically, it's good, feels great, I want to love it, I do not love it. Not even close. I like it a lot. I want to pick it up and play it, but since I've had it, it's spent more time just sitting than it has in my hands, if that tells you anything. And the reason for that is that this operating system, the Retroid UI, has its fair share of issues that I can't really get past, even if you look past the marketplace and the names and everything being off on that. The Dreamcast and Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1 games that you would want to have a right analog stick for, it's just not an option. So that's my issue with this. With Android, it just chugs, so even trying to get a game on there, unless you copied them to the SD card and just did it that way, the Android system is just painfully slow. and it's usable, but it is very frustrating, extremely frustrating. And again, this is only about, I think it's $80 right now, so that's kind of minor. You get what you pay for. The system is great, it looks great, it feels great, but that is my honest opinion. And you know, if you were like me and you wanted to know if it had a suspend mode, it does, so that'll answer that question. If you wanted to know that this operating system is worth, you know, using, it is and it isn't. It just depends on what you're looking for. And then if you wanted to know if Android was usable and how that all ran, not great. So anyway, that is my video. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. I would be happy to get back in touch with everybody. Please like and subscribe if you like this video, and hopefully I'll be putting out some more content here pretty soon. Have a good day.